still think crypto was going to come down. There was a bubble in the crypto markets.
In today's video, technical analyst Gareth Soloway believes we may still see a bigger drop to $12,000 and $13,000 for Bitcoin. However, unlike in his past interviews, Soloway is bullish on Bitcoin in the short term.
So the charts themselves should remain pretty accurate, but what you have to be aware of is when you have lighter volume, the moves can be much more accentuated, right? So when you have a support level, it can pierce by a decent amount because there's just not the volume to kind of soak up the small amounts of sells. And same thing on the buy side. So what I do is when I see something that has thinner volume, I just automatically am more cautious around levels. I buy smaller amounts, I dollar cost average in more, and that kind of protects me. But overall, a level is a level and it should hold. You just have to be ready for those lighter volume whips. And just in terms of people taking things off exchanges, I wouldn't be surprised if part of that also has to do with so many of these exchanges are now locking accounts and not allowing people to withdraw. So it's almost like a pre-measure, right? People are saying, all right, I don't want to risk this, so let me pull this off the exchange. I think with the dollar, you have to look at it as it is a pressure factor with crypto. Like if you had a dollar that wasn't up so significantly for this year, 2022, would crypto still be at 30,000? Now, I still think crypto was going to come down. There was a bubble in the crypto markets, in the NFT markets, all of these markets, but you have to think that the dollar has played some role in forcing it down. So the question is that if the dollar starts to pull back, do we start to make a near-term bottom in crypto? I still ultimately think we're headed a little bit lower, maybe 12,000-ish on the crypto Bitcoin market, but I do think we're due for a dollar pullback here. And that could be the relief rally that we get a crypto move, maybe in Bitcoin back to 25, maybe 28,000. So inevitably, them talking that up will create some sort of buy interest, like we were just talking about the thinner volume. Maybe that's a catalyst as well to help the bounce. But one of the things I've learned in all the cycles that I've traded, whether it's stocks or commodities or crypto, is that usually these calls are early, right? So you're still going to see one more good flush. They have to flush out the weak hands that are buying here. And again, just be ready for that. It doesn't, if you look at it in perspective, we were at 68, 69,000. We're now down to 20, or we were sub 20. This is obviously getting inexpensive, but just be aware that markets tend to push you more than you're aware in each direction. So it went higher than many people thought and ultimately will go lower than many people think. So I think the key is if inflation is high, I think that the hands are tied. The politicians' hands are tied. There's too many voters in that middle income kind of range that just aren't going to be able to stomach these high prices, right? They're being hurt too much. But I will say this, if you do see inflation come in, let's say it comes back to that 5% area, and all of a sudden we enter a recession because of the higher rates, because of all these other factors, and let's say unemployment rises to 7 or 8%, there's no doubt in my mind that the government, as well as the Fed, will start thinking about stimulus once again. So this is going to be a merry-go-round where you have, inflation, you whack-a-mole with inflation, right? And then it causes the unemployment to jump up and they smack that side. And then it's just a back and forth at this point with honestly no good outcome, but it probably takes years to really capitulate. So, there was so much talk about how crypto needed to stay in that kind of unregulated area, decentralized. And then all of a sudden, all these exchanges are halting withdrawals and we're seeing these things go bust. And now there's a kind of an outcry for, hey, we need help here. We need to see some regulation. So I think the key is that I love seeing senators and politicians that have exposure to Bitcoin or crypto. I love seeing that because it means that likely their bills won't be too detrimental. And if anything, a net positive. And net positive is everything. And I've said it before, but it's so worth saying is if you're like me and you have this hugely long-term bullish view on Bitcoin and crypto, you need to see regulation because that's the only way you get pension funds, you get all these bigger players in there is if there's some sort of security. So if we can get that, I think that would be, honestly, that could almost just mark a bottom just as well as the Fed reversing course. Levels will work, but you have to be kind of cognizant of that ability for things to flush through real quick. Like in all fairness, you could argue we saw that with the recent move down on Bitcoin where it actually hit the 2017 highs and then pierced and then bounced a little bit, then kind of hovered below it and now it's starting to creep up. And again, what that is it's just the unsure nature of the market, the lack of volume, the lack of buyers, but also showing us the fact that it's not crashing down is that there's also a lack of sellers now. So that's kind of the whippiness around these key levels that you start to expect as the volume gets lighter, versus if there was a ton of buyers waiting there with lots of volume, we would have never have gone much below, maybe a brief secondary pierce. But that's true. I mean, the volume definitely is important here. My guess is people are at that point, like we talked about, where they're pulling things off the exchanges to protect themselves, but they're also in that kind of, what do I do here? I'm in from, what is the average price of a Bitcoin holder? $50,000, $60,000. You kind of get to that point where, and I've been in this position with stocks, where you don't even want to look anymore. You just kind of pull it off. You say, all right, I'm going to become a hodler and I'm going to just tuck it away somewhere. I'll look at it in 3 years or something like that, You have to understand how the psychology of the markets work. He's a soundboard that millions of people listen to. So he's going to create max bullishness when he was bullish on that tweet on Ethereum, which means the top is very close, and max bearishness in this scenario, where anyone who is going to dump Ethereum is going to hear him and say, oh my goodness, I have to sell my Bitcoin, my Ethereum. And then after that, there's no more sellers. And obviously there are potential sellers, but in the near term, it kind of wipes the board clean of those people that were going to sell once they do it. And that creates these reversals. So I am such a contrarian indicator, and I use human psychology like this, and it is such a great method. First off, I'm loving the fact that we've recaptured, and this yellow line represents your 2017 high. So this is kind of what I was talking about. Here's your panic kind of sell, beautiful reversal, and then we crept up, and then we kind of came back under, and now we're back above. So at least in the short term, I am bullish. I do think Bitcoin has upside. Upside may be somewhat limited. My first level here that I'm looking at is around 25,500. That's that Terra Luna collapse low right there. So that's going to be some resistance. And then if we get through that, your next big test is around 28,500. So right now, these are the two levels I'm eyeing, which still, again, $5,000 up from here gives you a nice percentage return. But again, this would be a short-term move. I personally don't think Bitcoin has fully bottomed out yet. And again, keep in mind, I'm a swing trader, but also that macro view. So my swing trade side is bullish right now near term. My midterm, which is the next 3 to 6 months, I still think we have one more leg to flush out. My thinking is we're heading down to this area right down here, right around 12,000 to 13,000. And I'll just tell you this, is that my thought process about why we haven't bottomed is that you haven't seen all out, basically people just throwing their hands up in the air, and you still have too many cryptocurrencies out there. We've started to weed out the weak hands, the Celsiuses, the other ones filing for bankruptcy, the Terra Lunas that shouldn't have been in this situation. But we still have thousands of cryptocurrencies. And if you look at the .com bubble, which is very reminiscent to what we're seeing here, you had a period where so many of them went bust, and also other ones got bought out. I think recently FTX announced they were buying Block 5 for like 99% discount. That's what we want to see, but it's not over yet. So again, that probably means one more flush later on. What I would say though is this is important, is that don't necessarily think that it's a guaranteed flush, right? So what I did was when we got to 19,000, I started a very small hodl position. And what I'm going to do is every 2 to 3,000 lower, I'm going to add another small position, accumulating a bigger core. Because yes, I think we might go to 12,000, but there's no, I'm not going to buy every week there and just miss the whole train. As much as I love Bitcoin going forward, got to start dipping those toes into the water.